deep in the northern forests of Earth where snow never truly melted even in the heart of summer. A strange light tore through the sky, not with thunder but with silence. It left no trail of fire, no roar of descent, only a soft silver streak that blinked once and vanished behind the black pines. The trees stood like ancient sentinels, their branches heavy with frost and memory, and among them something new had fallen, nestled between two gnarled roots, half buried in snow, and moss lay a pod, no larger than a child's bed. It was smooth and seamless, made of a material that shimmered like liquid moonlight. Though it was cold to the touch, inside, curled tightly against the chill, was a girl no taller than a human's forearm her skin held, the soft glow of morning mist over a lake shifting between silver and moss green as she breathed. Her hair clung to her face in damp strands, the color of wet bark, and her ears rose to delicate points that twitched at every whisper of wind. She was trembling not from the cold alone but from something deeper, a fear that coiled in her chest like a frozen river. Her eyes, wide and luminous, glowed faintly like twin moons caught in twilight, and they darted across the trees, searching for danger. That had followed her across the void beside her, coiled around her waist like a living scarf, was a creature no bigger than a house cat, its body covered in scales the color of storm clouds, its wings folded tight against its back like crumpled parchment, its tail curled protectively around the girl's leg, and its eyes narrow slits of amber, watched the forest with ancient wariness. The girl's name was Lila, though no one on this world knew that yet, and the creature was Kyle, her dragon, her only companion since the fall of their homeworld. They had traveled through the dark between stars in a vessel no larger than a seed, guided by instinct and the fading pulse of a dying star. They had not chosen this planet. It had chosen them, drawn by something old and quiet that slept beneath its crust. Footsteps broke the silence, not heavy or hurried but slow, deliberate, crunching through the snow with care. The girl flinched, her breath catching in her throat. Kale lifted his head, a low hiss escaping his throat. His tiny fangs bared like needles of obsidian from behind a wall of snow-laden furs. A figure emerged, tall, broad-shouldered, wrapped in a thick wool coat with fur lining the hood pulled low over their face. But their eyes were visible, kind, and steady, and they stopped several paces away. The human did not speak at first, did not reach for a weapon, did not even move their hands, stayed at their sides, palms open and empty. They simply watched and waited, as if giving the tiny alien the space to decide whether to flee or stay. Lila's heart hammered against her ribs. She had seen what humans did to strange things. They dissected them, caged them, turned them into stories or weapons. But this one did not look like the soldiers from the old broadcasts she had watched in secret aboard the escape pod. This one looked tired, gentle even after a long moment. The human knelt slowly, careful not to startle them, their knees sinking into the snow with a soft sigh. "Hello," they said. The word was simple, quiet, warm, like the first note of a lullaby. Lila did not understand the language, but she understood the tone. It carried no threat, only curiosity and something else, something she had not felt in a long time. "Kindness," Kyle growled low in his throat. His wings flared slightly, but the human did not react with fear. They simply nodded as if acknowledging his presence. "I won't hurt you," they added, though Lila still could not understand the words. The meaning came through, in the softness of their voice, the way their shoulders relaxed, the way their eyes never left hers with hunger or greed. Only concerns. Lowly, the human reached into their coat, not for a weapon, but for a small cloth bundle. They unwrapped it carefully, revealing a piece of bread still warm from the oven, steam curling gently into the cold air. They placed it on the snow between them and stepped back again, giving space again. Lila hesitated. Her stomach growled. Despite her fear, she had not eaten. In days, the journey had drained her, and Kale had used most of his energy to shield the pod during atmospheric entry. She glanced at Kale, who gave a soft chuff, his eyes still locked on the human, but his tail uncurled slightly, a sign of cautious acceptance. Lila reached out her fingers, trembling as she touched the bread. It was soft and fragrant with herbs. She broke off a tiny piece and offered it to Kale first. He sniffed it, then took it gently from her hand, his tiny jaws crunching softly. As he chewed, Lila watched the human as she ate her own piece, the warmth spreading through her chest. Not just from the food, but from the simple act of being seen not as a specimen, but as a person. The human smiled again, small but real, and sat down, in the snow a few feet away as if to say, "I will stay here as long as you need. My name is Claire," they said. Though Lila did not know the word name or Claire, she memorized the sound, the shape of it on their lips, and tucked it away like a seed. In her mind, as the sun dipped below the trees, painting the snow in hues of violet and gold, Claire rose slowly and gestured toward the path behind them. A cabin stood in the distance, smoke curling from its chimney windows, glowing with warm yellow light. "You can come with me," they said, voice soft. "If you want." Lila looked at Cale, who gave a slow blink, his way of saying yes. She nodded once, tiny but clear. Claire turned and began to walk, not too fast, not looking back, giving Lila the chance to follow or not. Lila stood on unsteady legs, Kyle leaping onto her shoulder, his claws gentle on her thin tunic. She took one last look at the pod, now half swallowed by snow, then turned and followed the human through the whispering pines. The cabin was small but warm, filled with the scent of pine resin and dried herbs. Shelves lined with books and jars of strange powders. A fire crackled in the stone hearth, and thick blankets were draped over wooden chairs. Claire motioned to a cushion near the fire and brought a bowl of warm broth made from root vegetables and wild herbs. Lila sat carefully, Cale curling into her lap, his eyes half closed with exhaustion. As the firelight danced across the walls, Claire watched the tiny alien girl eat with quiet awe. This was not the first strange thing they had seen in their life. Once they had worked with languages from 3 different colonies, decoding signals from deep space. But this was different. This was alive, fragile, and real. Lila finished the broth and looked up at Claire, her eyes no longer wide with terror but soft with something like wonder. She raised a hand and touched the air above the bowl. A symbol appeared, glowing faintly like breath on glass. It shifted and faded before Claire could study it, but they saw enough to know it was not random. It was language. "You're trying to talk to me," Claire said softly. Lila nodded, then pointed to herself. "Lila." She whispered the name like a secret. Claire repeated, "It Lila," and the girl smiled, a tiny, fragile thing, but real. Then she touched Cale's head. "Cale." Claire nodded. Lila and Cale. They said, "Welcome." Outside, the wind picked up, howling through the trees, but inside the cabin it was quiet, safe for the first time in a long time. Lila let her guard down just a little, and Cale uncurled enough to rest his chin on her knee, his breathing slow and even. Claire added another log to the fire and sat nearby, not too close, not too far, just enough to be there if needed. They watched the stars appear through the window one by one and wondered what kind of war could send a child and her dragon fleeing across the galaxy. But for now, there was only this moment. This quiet cabin, this trembling girl who had just said her name, and the human who had smiled and said hello. Days passed in the quiet rhythm of the cabin. Snow fell softly outside while inside the fire crackled and time moved like honey. Lila grew stronger with each meal, her glow steadier, her steps surer. Cale remained watchful, but he no longer hissed. When Claire entered the room instead, he would lift his head, blink slowly, and sometimes even stretch out a wing toward the warmth of the hearth. Claire learned quickly that Lila understood far more than she could speak. She watched everything, the way Claire chopped wood, the way she stirred stew, the way she hummed old songs while mending clothes, and she copied it all with careful precision. She began to mimic words, 2 simple ones like warm food, sleep, and fire. And each time she spoke, Claire would smile and repeat the word clearly so Lila could shape it right with her tongue. One evening, as the wind moaned through the pines, Lila sat by the window tracing shapes in the frost with her fingertip. The patterns glowed faintly, then faded, like footprints in mist. Claire watched from across the room, noticing how the symbols repeated themselves in loops and spirals like constellations or old runes. Curious, Claire brought out a notebook and a pencil and placed it gently on the table, in front of Lila. At first, Lila hesitated. Then she picked up the pencil with fingers too small for human tools, but she managed to draw a symbol. It shimmered on the page for a moment before fading into ordinary graphite. Claire turned the page and pointed to it. "Again," she said softly. Lila drew another and another until the notebook filled with glowing glyphs that pulsed with quiet energy. Claire studied them, not as a scientist, but as someone who once spent years listening to the silence. Between words, she had worked with alien dialects before, back when she wore a uniform and sat in sterile rooms, decoding signals from dead worlds. But this was different. This was alive. That night, Claire dreamed of stars, not the cold, distant kind, but warm, living stars that sang in voices like wind chimes when she woke. Leela was standing beside her bed, eyes wide with something like recognition. "You saw it," Layla whispered, her voice barely more than breath. Claire sat up. Slowly. "Saw what?" Lila reached out and touched Claire's forehead gently. And in that instant, a flood of images poured into Claire's mind. Not as words, but as feelings, as colors, as memories. Not her own. She saw a world of towering crystal trees, their leaves chiming, in a breeze that smelled of rain and ozone. She saw cities built inside living mountains, their halls lit by floating orbs of soft light. She saw Lila as a child running through fields of silver grass, laughing as Kyle chased her. His wings still, too small to fly. Then the sky turned red, shadows fell from the clouds, not ships but beings made of smoke and silence. They moved without sound and left no footprints. They called themselves the Veiled, and they sought the core, the heart of creation, hidden deep within Lila's world. A power older than stars, capable of weaving new realities or unraveling old ones. Lila's people had protected it for generations, but the Veiled were relentless. They burned the crystal forests, silenced the singing mountains, and hunted the guardians one by one. Lila's mother had hidden the core, not in a vault or a temple, but inside the soul of a dragon. The only vessel strong enough to hold such power without breaking. Kale, the memory ended with Lila running, through smoke and fire, clutching a tiny egg to her chest, the last dragon. The last hope. Claire gasped as the vision faded, tears on her cheeks. She looked at Lila, who was trembling again, not from cold, but from the weight of what she carried. "You're not just running," Claire said softly. "You're protecting." Lila nodded, her eyes shining. "They think it is weapon," she said, struggling with the words. "But it is seed, it grows worlds." Claire understood then why Lila had come to Earth, not by accident but by design. Something here called to the core, something old and sleeping beneath the planet's crust. Maybe the same thing that had once drawn ancient humans to build circles of stone and whisper to the stars. Over the next few days, Claire taught Lila more words, and Lila taught Claire more symbols. They built a bridge between their minds, word by word, image by image. Kale watched it all from his perch on the windowsill, his amber eyes missing nothing, but peace never lasts long. One morning, as Claire fetched water from the stream, she noticed something strange. A drone no bigger than a bird hovered near the tree line, its body sleek and black, its lens glinting in the weak sunlight. It made no sound, but its presence was wrong. Like a spider in a flower bed, she dropped the bucket and ran back to the cabin. "We have to go," she said, breathless. Lila looked up from the notebook, her eyes wide. "They found us." Claire packed quickly. Food blankets, the notebook with Lila's symbols. She wrapped Lila in a thick scarf and tucked her inside her coat. Kale climbed onto her shoulder, his claws digging in with urgency. They left through the back door, vanishing into the trees just as the drone passed over the cabin, its lens. Scanning the empty room, they walked for hours through snow and silence. Claire, moving with the quiet grace of someone who once trained for war, she avoided open spaces, stuck to the shadows of the pines, and listened for the hum of machines. But the drones were smarter than she expected. They moved in pairs, weaving through the forest like wolves, their sensors tuned to heat, to movement, to anything out of place. By nightfall, they reached a frozen river, its surface smooth as glass. Claire tested the ice with her boot, then motioned for Lila to follow. But as they stepped onto the ice, a sharp whine cut through the air. 3 drones dropped from the trees, their lenses locking onto them. Claire pulled Lila close. "Run," she whispered. They sprinted. Across the ice, the drones closed behind their movements, too fast, too precise. Kale hissed and suddenly leapt from Claire's shoulder into the air, his tiny body glowing with inner light. He opened his mouth and exhaled. Not fire, but something stranger, a ripple of distorted air that spread like a wave. The lead drone hit the ripple and froze mid-air, suspended in a bubble of slowed time. Its wings still but unmoving. The other two veered away. Confusedly, Lila collapsed to her knees, gasping. "Kale!" she cried. Kale dropped to the ice, exhausted, his glow dimming. Claire scooped him up and grabbed Lila's hand. "Keep moving," she urged. They made it to the other side just as the ripple faded and the drone resumed its flight, but it was too late. They were already gone, swallowed by the trees and the dark. That night, huddled beneath a rocky overhang, Claire wrapped Lila and Kale in every blanket she had. Lila's voice was weak but clear. "They want the core," she said. "They think it will. Give them power, but it will break them. It breaks everything that is not ready." Claire stroked her hair gently. "Who are they?" "Xenotech," Lila whispered. "They hunt strange things. They take them apart to see how they work." Claire knew. The name Xenotech was a private division funded by old Earth governments. They had been involved in every major alien contact since the Mars incident. Ruthless, efficient, and always hungry for advantage. "They won't stop," Claire said. Not as a question, but as fact. Lila shook her head. "No." Kale stirred in his sleep, a soft rumble in his chest, like distant thunder. Claire looked up at the stars through the bare branches and made a decision. She could not protect Lila alone. Not from Xenotech. Not from the Veiled. If they were still out there, she needed help. Someone who understood things that should not be understood. She thought of Mara Ellis, had been her closest friend during the colony wars. A brilliant astrophysicist who once mapped the resonance frequencies of neutron stars for fun. She had also been the one who warned Claire about Xenotech's secret labs on Europa, before disappearing from public view, labeled a conspiracy theorist and stripped of her clearance. If anyone could help, it was her. "We have to go to the Cascade Mountains," Claire said. "There is someone there who can keep you safe." Lila looked at her with tired eyes. "You keep me safe." Claire smiled faintly. "Not enough." They slept in shifts. That night, Claire watching the trees, Kale watching the sky, and Lila dreaming of crystal forests and red skies. Be dawn, they were moving again, the snow falling heavier now, hiding their tracks. Claire kept to the high trails where the trees grew thin, and the wind howled like a warning. She carried Lila most of the way, Kale curled inside her coat, his warmth a small comfort against the cold. As they climbed higher, the world grew quieter, more still, as if the mountain itself was holding its breath. Claire knew they were close when she saw the old observatory perched on a ridge, its dome cracked and covered in ivy, but its windows still intact. She whistled a tune they used to use in the field. 3 notes, short, long, short. A light flickered inside, then went out, then flickered again. Mara was home. They reached the door just as the sun broke through the clouds. Mara opened it before Claire could knock her hair wild. Her glasses crooked, but her eyes sharp as ever. She took one look at Lila and Kyle and stepped aside without a word. Inside the observatory was chaos, books stacked on every surface, wires snaking across the floor, holograms flickering in midair. But it was warm and safe, and for the first time in days, Lila let out a breath. She had been holding Mara, knelt in front of her. "Hello, little star," she said softly. Lila looked at Claire, then back at Mara, and whispered, "Hello." Kyle uncurled from Claire's coat and stretched his wings once, then hopped onto Mara's shoulder, as if he had known her forever. Claire sank into a chair, exhausted but relieved. They were not safe yet, not truly, but they were no longer alone, and sometimes that was enough. The observatory stood on a high ridge where the wind never slept, and the stars burned brighter than anywhere else on Earth inside. It hummed with old machines and newer ones built from scrap and stubborn hope. Mara moved through the clutter like a conductor guiding an orchestra of chaos wires coiled around her boots. Screens blinked with data streams in languages most humans had never seen, and yet she understood them all. Lila sat on a worn couch, wrapped in a quilt stitched with constellations. Kyle lay curled in her lap, his scales pulsing faintly with each breath. He had not spoken since they arrived. Not that he ever used words, but his silence was deeper now, heavy with exhaustion and something else. Worry Claire watched them from across the room, her hands wrapped around a mug of bitter tea steam, curling into the cold air. She had told Mara everything, the crash, the symbols, the vision, the drones, and Mara had listened without interrupting, her fingers tapping against her chin. her eyes distant as if already solving a puzzle no one else could see. Now Mara stood before a large screen covered in shifting glyphs. Lila's glyphs. "This is not just language," Mara said softly. "It is memory encoded in light." She turned to Lila. "You are not writing words, you are sharing pieces of your world." Lila nodded slowly. "My people speak with light," she said. "When we remember, we glow." Mara's eyes lit up. "Then the core inside Kale, it is not just power. It is history. It is life." Lila looked down at the dragon sleeping in her lap. "Yes," she whispered. "It holds the song of our world, the first breath of our stars, the last cry of our mothers." She touched Kale's head gently. "He carries it so it does not die." Claire set her mug down. "But Xenotech thinks it is a weapon." "Of course they do," Mara said bitterly. "They see power and assume destruction. They do not understand that creation is the strongest force in the universe." She walked to a shelf and pulled out a dusty device shaped like a tuning fork. "This is a resonance scanner. I built it to detect harmonic anomalies in deep space. But it might work on Kale." Lila hesitated, then nodded. Kale lifted his head and gave a soft chuff, his way of saying yes. Mara activated the device. A low hum filled the room. The air shimmered and Kale's scales began to glow brighter. Not with heat, but with color shifting through blues and golds like sunlight through ocean water. The scanner beeped rapidly, glyphs appearing on its small screen. "Incredible," Mara breathed. "The core is not solid. It is woven from quantum threads of living memory. It responds to emotion, to intent." She looked at Lila. "It is not a thing to be taken. It is a trust to be honored." Lila's eyes filled with tears. "They will not honor it. No, they would not." That night, as the wind howled around the observatory, Claire stood watch at the window, her old instincts sharp as ever. She had seen what Xenotech did to things they could not control. They dissected them, digitized them, erased them until nothing remained but data in a vault. She would not let that happen to Lila or Kale. Meanwhile, Mara worked tirelessly, connecting the scanner to larger systems, mapping the core's resonance pattern. She discovered something alarming. The core was weakening, not from damage, but from distance. The farther Lila and Kale were from their homeworld, the more the song faded, like a radio signal lost in static. "They need to return," Mara said later that night, "or the core will go silent forever." "But the Veiled are still out there," Lila said, her voice small. "They wait." "Then we buy you time," Claire said. "How?" Mara asked. Claire looked at the mountains, the endless dark, the sky full of watching stars. "We teach Kyle to protect the song not with force but with shield." Over the next few days they began a strange kind of training in the observatory's lower chamber, a circular room lined with copper and quartz. Mara called it the echo chamber. It amplified resonance, making even the smallest vibration visible. Lila stood in the center, Kale on her shoulder, and together they focused on the core, not to unleash it, but to shape it like clay in their minds. At first, nothing happened. Then, one morning, as dawn painted the peaks pink, Kale exhaled a soft mist that hung in the air, not cold, not hot, but still within it. Tiny lights swirled like fireflies, forming a dome around them. "A temporal shield," Mara whispered, amazed. "It bends time just enough to hide you from sensors." Lila swayed with exhaustion but smiled. "We can hide. Not forever," Claire said gently. "But long enough." They practiced every day, Lila growing stronger, Kale more confident, the shield lasting longer each time, but it took a toll. Every use drained them, leaving Lila pale, and Kale's glow dimmed to a faint ember. Still they pushed on, because they knew time was running out. And then the signal came. Mara had rigged old military satellites to watch for Xenotech movements. A week after their arrival, an alert flashed on her main screen. 3 helicopters had left a black site in Montana, heading northwest, their flight path. "Locked on the Cascade coordinates, they found us," Claire said flatly. Mara cursed under her breath and began pulling cables from the walls. "We have maybe 6 hours," she said. "I can activate the old defense grid. It is outdated, but it might slow them down." "And if it does not?" Claire asked. "Then we fight," Mara said simply. Lila stood in the center of the room, her small frame straight, her eyes clear. "No," she said. "We show them." Claire knelt before her. "Show them what?" "The truth," Lila said. "They think the core is weapon, but it is not. It is memory, it is love, it is home." She looked at Kale, who blinked slowly. "We let them see." Claire exchanged a look with Mara. This was dangerous. If Xenotech saw the core's power, they might try to take it by force, but if they felt its truth even for a moment, it might change them. "It is a risk," Mara said. "All hope is a risk." Lila replied. They spent the next hours preparing Mara, activated the defense grid, old sonic emitters buried in the ridges, drones repurposed to mimic wildlife signals, and a signal jammer that would scramble comms within a 2-mile radius. Claire sharpened her old combat knife, checked the charge on a pulse pistol she had hidden beneath the floorboards, and set traps along the main approach trails. Leela and Kale rested in the echo chamber, conserving their strength. As dusk fell, the helicopters appeared on the horizon, their rotors cutting through the sky like knives. Claire stood on the observatory balcony, Lila beside her, Kale on her shoulder, the wind tugging at their clothes, the mountains stretched below them, vast and ancient. And for a moment, it felt like they were the last people on Earth. The first helicopter circled once, then hovered. A voice boomed through a speaker. "This is Xenotech Division. You are harboring unauthorized extraterrestrial entities. Surrender them immediately." Claire did not answer. The voice came again, sharper. "You will not be warned again." Then, the rappelling began. Black-clad figures dropped from the sky, their movements precise, their weapons glowing with charged energy. Mara triggered the sonic emitters. A low-frequency pulse rolled through the ridge. The soldiers staggered, hands to their ears, but they kept coming. Claire fired the pulse pistol not to kill but to disable one soldier, dropped then another. But there were too many. They breached the outer gate. Then the lower level, their boots echoing on metal stairs. Leela stepped forward. "It is time." Claire nodded and opened the main door. The leader of the squad stepped inside, tall, cold-eyed, her uniform crisp. Despite the snow, her name was Elise, and she carried herself like someone who had never lost a fight. She looked at Lila, and Kale, then at Claire. "Hand them over," she said. "This does not have to end badly." Lila walked past Claire, her small form trembling but her voice steady. "You think the core is weapon," she said, "but it is not." Elise frowned. "We know what it is, no," Lila said. "You know what you fear." She raised her hands and Kale leapt into the air, his wings spreading wide, his body glowing brighter than ever before. The core awakened, not with explosion, but with song, a soundless melody that filled the room, not heard with ears but felt in the bones. Light poured from Kale, not blinding but gentle, washing over the soldiers like warm rain. And then they saw Lila's world, the crystal trees, the singing mountains, the mothers, weaving starlight into blankets for their children. They saw the veiled not as monsters but as beings who had forgotten how to hope. They saw the core, not as power, but as a promise that even broken worlds could heal. Lies dropped to her knees, tears streaming down her face. "We did not know," she whispered. The other soldiers lowered their weapons, their faces slack with wonder. The song faded slowly, leaving only silence and the sound of wind through the pines. Lila swayed on her feet. Claire caught her before she fell. Kale landed gently on her shoulder. His glow dimmed but steady. Lise looked up at Claire, her eyes raw. "What is it?" she asked. "It is a seed," Claire said, "and it is not yours to take." Elise nodded slowly, then stood. "We will leave," she said, "and we will make sure no one else comes." She turned and led her squad out into the snow without another word. When they were gone, Mara let out a breath she had been holding. It worked. Lila closed her eyes, for now, because somewhere out there beyond the stars, the veiled were still waiting, and the song was growing quieter with every passing hour. But for tonight, they were safe, and that was enough. The silence after the soldiers left was thick like snow after a storm. No engines, no voices, no boots on stone. Only the wind threading through the pines and the soft crackle of the observatory's old heating system. Mara stood at the main console, her fingers hovering over the keys as if afraid to break the quiet. Claire sat on the floor with Lila in her lap, the girl's breathing slow and even, but her skin dimmer than before, like a candle burning low. Kyle lay curled against her chest. His scales dull as ash. They had won, but it did not feel like victory. Mara finally spoke, her voice rough. They will not stay gone forever. Xenotech answers to people who do not care about truth, only control. Claire nodded. She knew it well. She had once worn their uniform before she saw what they did behind closed doors. Elise might keep them back for now, but someone else will come. Someone who does not listen. Lila stirred, her eyes fluttering open. The Veiled are closer, she whispered. I can feel them in the dark between stars. They followed the Corps' song. Mara turned from the console, her face pale. They are here. Not yet, Lila said, but soon. Kyle lifted his head, a low rumble in his throat like distant thunder. Claire stood and walked to the window. The mountains stretched below, wrapped in twilight and shadow. She had fought wars on 3 worlds. But this was different. This was not about territory or resources. It was about something older, something fragile, like the first green shoot after a fire. We cannot stay here, she said. Where do we go? Mara asked. Lila looked up, her eyes glowing faintly. To the place where Earth sings. Mara frowned, then her eyes widened. The resonance point, long ago, before cities or nations, before humans even walked upright. The planet had hummed with a quiet energy, a frequency that resonated with life itself. Ancient peoples had built circles of stone where the song was strongest, places like Stonehenge or the desert spirals of New Mexico. But there was one place left untouched, hidden deep in the Cascade Range, where the Earth's song still rang clear. It is dangerous, Mara said. The terrain is unstable and the path is lost to most. But not to you, Lila said softly. Mara sighed, then nodded. I mapped it years ago during my deep resonance project. I never told anyone. Then we go tonight, Claire said. They packed quickly, Mara gathering only what she could carry: scanner's power, cells, the resonance scanner, and a small device she called a harmonic anchor. Claire took weapons, food, and blankets. Lila needed nothing but kale and the quiet strength in her small hands. They left the observatory under a sky full of stars. The air, sharp with cold and promise. The trail down the ridge was narrow and slick with ice. But Mara led with sure steps, her boots crunching softly in the snow. Claire followed close behind, Lila tucked inside her coat. Kyle alert on her shoulder. Hours passed, the forest growing denser, the mountains rising like walls around them. The wind dropped as if holding its breath, and the only sound was their breathing and the occasional snap of a branch underfoot. Then Mara stopped. Before them stood a ring of stones, half buried in moss and snow. They were not large, but they hummed with a quiet energy that made the air shimmer like heat on desert sand. This is it, Mara whispered. Lila climbed down from Claire's coat and walked to the center of the ring, her bare feet touching the frozen earth. She knelt and placed her palms flat on the ground. Kyle leapt beside her and pressed his forehead to the stone. A low tone filled the air, not loud but deep, like the note of a great bell struck far away. The stones began to glow faintly, blue light tracing ancient carvings worn smooth by time. The earth remembers, Lila said. Mara activated the harmonic anchor, placing it in the center of the ring. It pulsed, once then synced with the stones. A dome of soft light rose around them, not visible from outside but strong enough to shield them from sensors and scans. This will hide us, Mara said. For a while. Claire kept watch at the edge of the ring, her eyes scanning the trees, her hand resting on the pulse pistol at her belt. She knew they were running out of time. The Veiled did not need sensors. They followed the silence, the absence of song, and the core was fading. Lila sat cross-legged in the center, Kale curled in her lap, both of them glowing faintly as they tried to strengthen the connection to the Earth's resonance. But it was not enough. The song here was old, but thin, like a thread about to snap. We need more, Lila said, her voice strained. More what? Claire asked. Memory. Lila looked at her. Human memory. Claire understood. Then she knelt beside Lila and closed her eyes. She thought of her mother's hands kneading bread, the smell of rain on dry earth, the sound of children laughing in a refugee camp on Mars, the quiet courage of people who had lost everything but still shared what little they had. Mara joined them, thinking of her first view of Saturn's rings through a telescope. The joy of solving an impossible equation, the warmth of friendship in a cold universe. The ring of stones glowed brighter, the dome of light strengthening, weaving human memory with alien song. But it was not enough to stop what came next. A shadow fell over the trees, not cast by moon or cloud, but by something that swallowed. Light itself, the air grew cold, not with winter, but with absence. The wind died. The birds fell silent. The veiled had arrived. They stepped from the trees, not walking, but appearing as if they had always been there. Tall figures wrapped in shifting darkness. Their faces hidden, their presence heavy like a stone on the chest. Leela stood, her small form trembling, but her voice clear. "You should not be here." One of the veiled stepped forward, its voice like dry leaves scraping stone. "The core belongs. To the void it must be unmade." "No," Lila said. "It belongs to life." The veiled raised a hand and the light of the stones flickered. The dome weakened. Claire drew her pistol, but Mara stopped her. "Weapons will not work on them." "Then, what will?" Claire asked. "Truth," Lila said. She stepped forward, Kale rising with her. His wings spreading wide, his body glowing with the last of his strength. The core awakened not with force but with memory. Light poured from Kale not to blind, but to show. The veiled froze as the song washed over them, not just Lila's world but Earth's too. The first flower pushing through ice. The first human reaching for the stars. The quiet acts of kindness that no history book recorded, but that kept. The world turning, one of the veiled staggered back, its darkness thinning at the edges. "We forgot," it whispered. "You can remember," Lila said. For a moment it seemed they would. The darkness wavered like smoke in wind. Then another veiled stepped, forward stronger, colder. "Memory is weakness," it hissed and raised its hand. The dome shattered. Kale cried out, a sound like glass breaking, and fell to the ground. Lila caught him, her own light dimming fast. Claire moved without thinking. She threw herself between Lila and the veiled, her arms wide. "You will not take them." The cold veiled laughed, a sound like cracking ice. "You are nothing." But Mara was already moving. She slammed the harmonic anchor into the center stone and shouted. Now the earth sang not a whisper but a roar. The stones blazed with light. The ground shook and a wave of pure resonance shot outward, not to destroy but to awaken. The veiled screamed as the song filled them, not with memory, but with feeling something they had buried long ago. Their darkness tore like cloth in a storm, and for the first time in eons they wept. The leader fell to its knees, its form flickering between shadow and something almost human. "We were lost," it said. "So long lost," Lila walked to them slowly, her glow weak but steady. "You are found." The veiled looked at her, then at Kale, then at the humans who had stood between them and the core. "We will go," it said, "and we will not return." They faded into the trees, not vanishing but walking away, their steps lighter than before. Silence returned, but it was different now, softer. Kinder Lila sank to her knees. Claire caught her. Kale stirred in her arms, his scales flickering with a faint but steady light. Mara collapsed, against a stone, breathing hard. "It worked, for now," Lila whispered, but this time it felt like more than enough. Because the song was no longer fading, it was growing. Morning came soft and golden over the mountains, the air clean and still, as if the world itself was breathing easier. The ring of stones no longer hummed with urgency, but with a quiet, steady pulse like a heartbeat beneath the earth Lila sat in, the center wrapped in Claire's coat. Her eyes closed, but her face calm. Kale lay across her lap, his scales shimmering with a gentle light. Not bright like before, but warm like embers in a hearth. Mara stood at the edge of the circle, scanning the trees with a handheld device, her expression unreadable, but her shoulders less tense than they had been in weeks. "No signals," she said finally. "No drones, no soldiers, no shadows." She turned to Claire. "They really left." Claire nodded, but did not relax, not yet. "They will be back," she said. "Not today, not this week, but someone always comes." "Maybe," Mara said. "But not for the core." Not anymore. She looked at Lila. They saw it for what it is. Lila opened her eyes, then not glowing, but clear deep like still water. The song is safe now, she said. Earth has heard it and Earth will keep it. Kale lifted his head and gave a soft chuff. His wings stretching once, then folding back against his body. He was smaller than before his form, more delicate, as if the core had settled deeper inside him. Not as a weapon, not as a burden, but as a part of his soul. Over the next few days they stayed in the stone circle resting. Healing Mara used the harmonic anchor to weave the earth's resonance into a gentle shield, not to hide but to protect like a cradle made of song. Claire gathered food from the forest roots, berries, dried meat from her pack, and built a small fire that did not smoke too much. She kept watch at night. Not because she feared attack, but because old habits do not die easy. Lila spent her days walking the ring barefoot, her fingers trailing over the stones. Sometimes she would hum a tune so soft it was almost silence, and the stones would answer with a low tone that made the leaves tremble. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the western peaks, Lila sat beside Claire on a flat rock, her legs dangling over the edge. "I must go soon," she said. Claire did not look at her. "No, the core needs to return to the stars," Lila said. "It is not meant to stay in one place too long or it will sleep again. And Kale, he goes with me." Lila smiled faintly. "He always does." Claire nodded, her throat tight. She had known this moment would come from the first time she saw the tiny alien girl trembling in the snow. But knowing and feeling were two different things. "Will you come back?" she asked. Lila looked up at the sky where the first stars were beginning to appear. "If the song calls me," she said. "I will come." Mara joined them, then holding a small device in her hands. "I built this," she said. "It is a beacon not for location but for resonance if you ever need to find Earth. Or if Earth ever needs you, it will sing to you." Lila took it gently. It was shaped like a leaf made of polished metal and warm to the touch. "Thank you," she whispered. The next morning the sky cleared completely. Not a cloud in sight. The air, crisp and bright as glass. Lila stood in the center of the ring. Kale on her shoulder, her small form wrapped in a cloak Mara had stitched from old star charts. Claire handed her a small pouch bread. She said, "For the journey." Lila took it and tucked it into her belt. Then she hugged Claire tightly, her arms small but strong. "You smiled when I was afraid," she said. "That is why I trusted you." Claire held her for a long moment, then stepped back. Mara placed a hand on Lila's head. "Fly safe, little star." Lila nodded, then raised her hands. The stones began to glow, not with the fierce light of battle, but with a soft, silver radiance that rose into the sky like mist, forming a path of light that spiraled upward into the clouds. From far above, a shape appeared, not a ship of metal, but something woven from light and memory, its hull shimmering like water under moonlight, its wings wide as mountains. It made no sound as it descended, only a gentle hum that matched the Earth song. Lila turned to Claire one last time. "Goodbye. Hello again someday," Claire said. Lila smiled, then stepped onto the path of light. Kyle leapt from her shoulder and circled once before landing beside her. The vessel opened a doorway of swirling stars and they stepped inside. The light faded. The vessel rose silently into the sky and vanished among the clouds. Claire and Mara stood in the ring long after it was gone, the stones still warm beneath their feet, the air still humming. With a quiet song back at the cabin weeks later, Claire sat on the porch wrapped in a blanket, the snow melting into streams that sang as they ran down the mountain. She watched the stars appear one by one and thought of a tiny girl with moss-green skin and a dragon no bigger than a house cat. Somewhere out there among the stars, Lila was no longer trembling, and on Earth the song remained, not loud, not demanding, but there waiting for those who knew how to listen.